this is an area where you've definitely got some experience as a backup who's had to deal with these sort of situations. I'm just curious, how does the week look when you're a backup that knows he's going to start? How does that week of preparation change for that guy compared to maybe the guy who's already the starter?
Yeah, I mean it's an interesting situation because I'm sure people watching this show understand that like the backup quarterback gets no reps during the week with the starters, zero. You are literally running the scout team against the one defense, and you are literally running cards. If say the Chargers are playing the Cowboys, I'd be Dak Prescott if I was a backup for the Chargers all week long. So you get no reps, and then what I always did was I always ended up. After those reps on scout team, I would stay after, and I would always walk through the practice script of the starting plays. I maybe not get the throws that the starter get, but maybe there's on Wednesday, say there's 35 plays. I would go through and I'd have maybe the quarterback coach or the OC. When I was in New Orleans, it was Joe Lombardi. He would just stay out there with me, and we would just walk through the script. He would repeat the play to me, and he'd tell me the play, and I'd repeat it back. And we'd walk through the footwork. It's sort of what you see Tua do with Darrell Bevel pregame. Is like you do that exact same thing, walk through. Okay, here's a read, here's a read, here's a read. You don't necessarily get the same throws, but it is different when a backup knows he's going to start, because maybe say it's week 5 or week 6, and this is the first time he's had a full week of practice with the ones. Okay. And that's what people don't understand is like, as a backup for 6 weeks, you haven't run your team's offense in a practice or a game. So it's a little bit foreign at the start of the week. It's a little bit weird.
So
Even
how
the
do you
center
even
quarterback
come in the
exchange.
middle of a game and function then? Like
That's
what
why we get
Tyson
paid the
Bagent
big
had
bucks,
to do
man.
last week, how much of the game plan are you actually aware of, comfortable with? Like, all right, let's say like what happened in Chicago. Quarterback gets hurt in the third quarter, you have to come in. How much of the offense that they've put in this week is even available to you as a backup who comes in the middle of the third quarter?
Oh, you better be able to run every single bit of it. I mean,
Okay.
that's just like the way it is, man. That's literally why you are a backup quarterback in this league. And I've always said it I've always said it twice. Like, you got to be ready. The two things of a backup quarterback: one, you have to play and play really well when you're called upon. Like no ifs, ands, or buts about it. This league is a production league. That's it. Bottom line. And two, you have to be able to service a starter any way possible. So whatever he needs to do to get ready, you do it. And one of those things is like, hey, I might stay extra, and that's how I sort of prided myself on. I might stay extra, after the starter goes home or after something else, or maybe dive into the playbook just a little bit more. So mentally, I know that I can run every single play, and that's what I prided myself on. And I'm sure it changes, like with an undrafted rookie free agent in Tyson, like you're probably not as an offensive play caller. That falls on you. You're not going to call the entire offense that maybe you would for Justin Fields, because they're a little bit different players. And so I think that's always been the interesting thing in the week is like, how do these offensive coordinators or play callers offensively know that they can trust a backup quarterback? Well, it starts in free agency. It starts in your team. You have to be able to understand, like, you go back to training camp. I've had guys like Nagy went back and just watched some of my training camp reps before he put a game plan in and be like, hey, you're really good. We feel like you're really good at this. Are you comfortable with this? And that's another thing. There's just open conversation.
Sure.
Hey, every time I've had it, it's like maybe even more so than the starter. Like, hey, do you feel comfortable with this? Because if you're not, we're going to pull it, because I don't want you in a situation where you have to go out there and run something you've never ran before. Right. And so I think that's the interesting dynamics with this, is like, people don't understand is like, dude, you're not getting reps during the week. And say you go in week 6, it's like even something as easy for practice, something as easy as the quarterback center exchange. Like for me last year, when I had that, like me and Corey Linsley had a little bit of an issue, because it was like, and it was mostly my fault, because I was getting out of there too early, whereas Justin stood in there. So even the smallest details make all the difference. And then also Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, Josh Palmer, I hadn't thrown to those guys since training camp. And honestly, maybe like a few days in training camp and never live, because you're always going with the twos. So think about that situation too, for a guy to be able, and that's what makes the position of backup quarterback so difficult. You never know what to expect. You got to just go out there and ball out and play. And that's what I felt like some of these guys coming in. Like I was really impressed with PJ Walker, honestly, last week, for him able to do that.
So obviously the stuff that's specific to Justin, the quarterback run stuff, some of those elements in the offense, that's in the garbage when Tyson Bagent comes in for the most part. But other than that, like the passing game plan, what percentage do you think can stay the same for a backup? Is it 60%? Is it 80%? Like, how much of that has to change when you know the backup quarterback is going to be in there, even getting a full week of reps?
Yeah, a lot of these teams. I mean, for me, I'm just going to say what I know. Every coach I was on knows I can run 100% of the game plan, and that's how I
Okay.
wanted it to be, and that's why I felt like I was able to succeed so much because they're like, hey, we don't have to change these game plans. And if you look, most teams, not all, like to get a backup quarterback that is similar to the starter in terms of ability, in terms not necessarily like, hey, you can be a starter too, but in terms of like what you can do on the field. Does that make sense? So
Yeah,
when
it
it
absolutely
is
does. You look at
time,
what the Ravens have done over the last couple of years and how they've built their
yes,
quarterback room. I think it's been very intentional. And
and
the fact
so
that some teams don't do that, whether it's
yes,
Gardner Minshew or what the Bears are going through right now, you've got to
yes.
experience a pretty wild swing.
And that's why I always look at who are the backup quarterbacks and how similar the backup is to the starter, because obviously there's going to be things it's a different, right? Like, let's break it up into two things. Like, one, the entire week that you're going to be the starter because that the backup's going to be the starter, so you get the whole week of practice. Obviously, the game planning of an offensive coordinator and people that are game planning are going to game plan for you as the backup, right? Okay, that makes it a lot easier because they're only going to put in stuff you feel comfortable with. So 100% of that game plan will be what you're going to call. And if a play's in, you might just have a little bit less amount of plays, but those plays in, you're
So
going to end
that's
up
my
running it.
question. It's maybe fewer plays than it would
Maybe.
be for a quarterback that's gotten used to what you're inputting over a 6-week period.
Yeah. Yeah, I, I
Okay.
I think that's fair, but then you look at what's interesting is always like if a starter gets hurt in the game, right? And that's happened to me in Minnesota with the Chicago Bears in 2018. And it's like, all right, like there was actually a high bit of like quarterback run in that game for Mitch. And you saw him like scramble around and he got hurt on like the third play of the game, first drive. And they're like, all right. So then if you watch that game, I just went to Nagy, the sideline. I was like, hey, let's just go more no huddle. Let's just get out there. Let's just press them with go. And we ended up playing really well. And they were able, but like a lot of that game plan, I felt comfortable with. But at the same time, you sort of lean into what your starters wants, because if your starter feels comfortable, then you're probably going to have a good game offensively.
I don't know. You're selling yourself short. I saw you move around a lot in like the 2007 season. You're more mobile than you give yourself credit for. Maybe not in 2018. At that
Back in
point,
the day, yeah.
we were both deep into our 30s at that point.
Oh my gosh.
The familiarity and the connection with the receivers. How do you go about trying to build that in a truncated amount of time? How do you microwave that? Is it just discussions? Is it throwing after practice? Like, what does that look like?
Well, it's getting the reps on the field, and if for some reason I were to miss a throw to Keenan Allen. Like, I'm going to grab Keenan Allen, even though he's a superstar, and be like, yo, bro, like, I just need one. Because a lot of these older receivers, like, I'm trying to save my legs. I'm trying to do that. But it's like a lot of these receivers also are really cool. If it's the backup, oh, yeah, bro, like, just throw me the ball 100 times in the game. We're good, bro. Like, yeah, I'll do whatever you want post practice. So that was always my case. Is I was always wanting to get as many possible throws, even if they would spot up and not run the full routes because their legs are dead if it's later in the season. I would go full speed through my drop and I would throw maybe an out route 6 or 7 times until I was like, all right, I'm good. You're good. All right, let's go spot up somewhere else. And I think it's just those reps, man. I think it's just it's so hard to go out there just not knowing the timing of receivers. Even Mike Williams, like, bro, I need a go ball because I need to see, like, actually feel how you're going to throw it or how you're going to be. And do you want a back shoulder? Do you want not? And you just have to sort of feel. I mean, that's what this position is you got to be able to just drop of a hat, man, get in there and perform.
How different do guys come out of breaks? Like, if two different receivers are running like a comeback, how different are the nuances in that route, in the timing, and where you want to put the ball between two specific guys?
Yeah, it's a lot because you take, for instance, Josh Palmer versus like a Keenan Allen or Mike Williams. Josh Palmer is explosive for the Chargers, right? This is what I'm talking about because it's the last team I was on. I remember these receivers. Josh Palmer's explosive, and he might come at a 45-degree angle, and he might just, because he was a newer receiver, second, third year, he might just run the route on the paper where it is exactly supposed to be, and I might like, well, I don't love that. Versus a Keenan Allen, he's not quite as like. He's fast twitchy, but he's not like coming down as fast. He's played in the league a lot longer. He might just actually do what you would expect him to do based on the coverage and the leverage of the corner.
It's more
And so
intuitive. Yeah.
it's more intuitive, and there's nothing wrong with that. It just comes with experience, right? You're constantly trying to grow as a team. And Mike Williams, I'm like, hey, I might need 2 hitches for Mike Williams because he might take just a half second longer to get out of his break. So all of that stuff goes. But at the end of the day, like, the best backup quarterbacks, they just play the game, man. They try not to overthink stuff. And I think I've been in situations in games where I just try to overthink stuff and try to overcoach stuff. And at the end of the day, those are probably my worst games. Like, you just got to go out there, and at the end of the day, you can do as much as you want in pre-practice and pre-game and trying to get timing right. But you just got to go out there and play. Like let your instincts take over, stop thinking, and just go out there and play and throw the ball, and it, it'll end up where it is.
In your career, who do you think you had the most intuitive connection with, where you just kind of understood how they were moving, where you had to put the ball, and that relationship was just really fine-tuned?
Yeah, I mean, I honestly really enjoyed throwing to Allen Robinson when he was with the Bears. Like, I just thought that he was such an easy target to throw to, but he also, back in that time, had that fast twitch. He had the separation ability, and if you look at the games, I mean, it was him and Treat Cohen were the ones that I was throwing to the most, because I was like, hey, look, like, these are my 2 best. I don't care what the coverage is. I'm going to feed them the ball. And those are these guys that give you the best chance to win. It's like, hey, if a coverage takes me to Trey Burton on a seam route, I'm like, well, okay, that's great. It might be open. If not, where's my check down? Where's Tariq? As fast as I can get to, because those guys with the ball in their hands were special.
How often can you get away with that? If the coverage is dictating that you go somewhere else, but you know you have a guy that you like that can consistently win, that your number 1 receiver. How many, like, what's the percentage? Like, how often can you do that?
That's a great question. I think it just depends on what the defense is doing in terms of coverage and structure. And I was always a part and wanted to, like, run the offense to the best of my ability. But the older I got, the more I was just like, hey, like, this game is about matchups. And even some of the best coaches I would have would be like, hey, it's players, not plays, right? It's players, not plays. And it might dictate here, but if you got Allen Robinson one-on-one, you want to take a go ball, so be it. Like, I remember a touchdown I threw in London. It was a sluggo route to Allen Robinson to the field. I think it was a trips formation, and it was a quarters coverage. So that should be completely dead. But I was just like, you know what? I'm just going to toss it up there and see what it was. And we made a really good back shoulder catch and throw. And it was one of those things I was like, wow, okay, like, maybe I just need to feed my guy. Like, I'm not going to do it every time. There's a risk and reward to it, but it was something that I remember doing for sure.
What's the conversation in the film review after that? Like, what does a coach say to you when you make that sort of decision?
Great throw. Like, great throw.
That's probably the right answer.
You saved my ass. Like, because we called a play that we were thinking we'd get single high coverage, and you made the throw. And that's why it's like, I'm telling you, dude, like, most of these coaches, like, you can put yourself in a position to play, but at the end of the day, it's the players, right? Like, you think you can draw up some plays, and we've talked about this before on this channel, on this show. It's like, hey, once or twice a game, you're going to get really lucky, and you're going to get the exact same look you drew up against this corner stop route, corner go route, whatever it is, and it's going to be wide open 1 or 2 times a game. That's it. And so the rest, it's just players making plays.